podcast, we have an absolute treat as I'm joined by four men that 20 years ago to this day inspired a country and generations of Aussie swimmers to come when they broke a 36-year-old stranglehold that Team USA had on the men's 4x100 meter freestyle relay. They won gold in spectacular fashion in the 2000 Sydney Olympics on night one of competition. It's my honor, it's my privilege to welcome to Off the Block Swimming Podcast, in relay order, I might add, Michael Klim, Chris Fydler, Ash Callus, and Ian Thorpe. Boys, how are we going?
Howdy.
Very well, thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Not a trouble at all, mate. This is a big moment for me on the podcast, that's for sure. When I first started, I wrote down 5 interviews that were just goals of mine that I never thought would happen, and this was one, especially getting 4 of you together at the same time. So a big moment for me. Now, listen, I want to get stuck into it. Much the same as myself, there's a lot of people, given the 20-year anniversary, have been looking back and looking upon different moments. I think I watched pieces of the opening ceremony from yesterday. Chris, firstly, I'll start with you. Have you been reliving any memories of the Sydney Olympic Games this week? Maybe not swimming-wise, but just any of them?
No, absolutely. It's been actually over the last couple of weeks. It's come around really quickly this year, and just having a look at some of the footage and some of the articles that are in the paper and remembering what it was like in Sydney. Even this morning, I was looking at some stuff in the papers, and it was just such a great time. And it wasn't just the swimming; it was the whole games themselves. It was just incredibly exciting. So, absolutely been living it. I can't believe it's 20 years. I don't feel as though I'm 20 years older, but probably look a little bit older. There's a few more grey hairs these days, mate. So
now you're not sitting in the dark, Fides. You actually do. You have aged, mate. Now you're not sitting.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ash. I think it's
he actually aged the best out of all of us.
Yeah. I also like that he's got the bike in the back. Yeah. Actually exercises still.
Yeah, exactly. I need to filter that, don't I? How do I do that? Look at that. No.
Now, Ian, I saw a week ago, mate, all you boys got together. I know Ash was stuck up in Queensland still, but he did join in with the launch of the Marvel Avengers game, which is out now for all of you gamers out there who want to get amongst it. Firstly, how nice was it to catch up, especially going through COVID and all the, people not being able to see each other? It must have been great to reconnect. And secondly, honestly, who was best and worst on ground in the gaming department?
So look, it was great for us to be able to catch up. Of course, it would have been better if Ash could have joined us for us. So that could have been all 4 of us, because it's rare that there's that we do catch up. It's usually 2 of us. So to go to 3, happens quite rarely. And all 4, I think next time when we do see each other, when it's post kind of COVID lockdowns and everything else, we should be able to go out and enjoy this moment and make sure that we do it. When it comes to playing the game, I think I may have been the worst, but I learned quite quickly. I think Ash, for some reason, happened to be the best at it. It was probably because he wasn't distracted or intimidated by anyone else. He was in his own space. He downloaded the game as soon as he could. He'd practiced. He'd done it all. And like how he swims, he's a little bit angry, so
he can take it out. Word, Thorpe.
Pide's just too busy heckling everybody. But it was
no. You got to work to your strengths, Mike. Yeah.
I did wonder how much of that, because it was very good editing and cutting in and out. So I was wondering how much of it was, how much of you guys were going good. So Ash, obviously, you did a bit of practice before you started, did you?
Yeah. Truth be known, there was a few logistical little hiccups, but by halfway through the game, I got the hang of it. So I let him know who was boss.
All right, boys, let's get stuck into why we're here today, which is to talk about the 2000 Sydney Olympics. And I guess before we sort of look at the success we had in Sydney, I think you need to go back a few years to even maybe 1998 in Perth at World Champs and the phenomenal success the Aussie team had there. Michael, I'll throw this one out to you. Do you think that meet and had a big effect in the momentum driving towards Sydney? I know we had a good 1999 as well as a team. I just remember the World Champs there with yourself, Susie, the boys relay team doing well, Grant, obviously the famous commentary that sort of reminds me, Ian, of yourself, which was world champion at 15, just those sort of memories. Do you think that had a bit to do with the success that we'd go on to have 2 years later?
It was an amazing transformation, really, even from '96, where we did obviously have a couple of gold medalists in KP and Susie, but I think as a team and the depth and the sport, obviously, and then these couple of big fellas and Thorpe and Hackey coming along and adding great value to the team. But I think we did transform in our relays even more so, and even beating the Americans in the medley relay on the last event, and Fides anchoring over the top of Gary Hall. That was probably just as sweet as the 4x1 freestyle in Sydney. But we did have a very conscious sort of focus on the Sydney games with relays, and that started sort of showing up pretty early, even in '97 and '98. So yeah, I think there was definitely it put us in good stead, and having so many great meets on home soil. Obviously Perth was really important, and having the Pampaks in Sydney, and obviously the Olympics the following year. You know, we were pretty spoiled to have major meets in our backyard. So I think that really had something to do with it. And I think everyone was just so focused on this opportunity of having the Olympic Games in Sydney. And yeah, I think it was everyone want to be part of it, you know, staff, swimmers, family and friends. So I think we knew what was in front of us. And I think, you know, Perth was probably the first opportunity that people got to race in front of the home crowd.
Now, as before we get to the pool and the relay, I'm interested from an athlete's perspective what the Olympics Games was like, because obviously as a 14-year-old kid myself, I was buzzing. I had videotapes ready to go to record everything. Everything sort of news was out there. We were watching. You guys were in it. You were amongst it. What was it like with the lead up, the media, the hype? Did you feel that? Did you guys all feel that? Or did you kind of try and put blinkers on, focus on the job at hand? Ash.
Oh, that directed at me. Sorry, guys. Look, I made the '98 Com Games team, so I had a bit of a taste of what a village type setup and being a part of that, and I had a bit of a taste of that. But nothing can really prepare you for the Olympics unless you've been one before. And as Michael said, there was a massive build-up leading into Sydney, and every athlete wants to be a part of their own home Olympics, and it was a fantastic opportunity for everyone. Obviously, there's only a select few that can get there, but for me, I really didn't know what to expect until you walk. Taking a step back, we're in Melbourne for our pre-camp, and things start to get a little bit real there, where everyone's together. Don Talbot, the head coach at the time, was making us walk to and from the pool to get used to walking around the village, and I never really considered that was even really a thing until you actually get there. Obviously, being young, rookie, relatively inexperienced, there wasn't a lot of media surrounding me, and so I was quite oblivious to all of it. I just had to go about my job. I was only there for one race because I finished third in both the 50 freestyle and the 100 freestyle to Michael and to Fides. So all I had to do was do 2 swims, 1 race, so to speak. And I really didn't know what was going on until we get into the village, and then you get your uniform on day one as you start to walk in, and then the goosebumps start to become evident, and a little bit nervous. And you had to contain myself walking around in there because there's so many distractions and other athletes and guys that I've been watching on TV, tennis players and things like that. And all of a sudden you're rubbing shoulders with these guys every day. So I had a roommate called Cameron Delaney, and I guess we just really had no idea what was really happening, but we were pretty lucky and fortunate that the team at the time, the swim team at the time, had a lot of experience. It was a bit of an experience with, bit of a mix with experience and youth, and all the guys were pretty good in just containing things. We had great staff and just enabled you to focus on what you had to do. So.
Same question to you boys. How was your Olympic sort of experience away from the pool and all the lead up to it? Obviously, each of you would have had your own experiences and dealt with things in a different way.
On the game. I'll jump so for me it was different. That was the third Olympic that I'd kind of been part of, and whilst there'd been a little bit of interest in Barcelona and Atlanta, the interest surrounding the swimming team was massive in comparison. And we had great athletes like Mike and Ian and Hackey and Kieran and Susie, who had great profiles in that team. Where in Barcelona, really there wasn't anyone of note with even half of that or quarter of the profile. So there wasn't much, and just the home interest was also different. And I think Ash has touched on a pretty good point, but I think the team handled it pretty well because we had a lot of experience that was sitting with a lot of youth and energy as well. And I remember a story actually while Ash was talking about that the first Olympic village I went into was Barcelona, and it was the first one for Kieran and Susie and Sam Riley and Matt Dunn and Ellie Overton, Phil Rogers. You know, there was a lot of guys that hung around for a long time, and that was our first Olympics. And walking around the village, I'm sure you've heard the stories. There's lots of free stuff and stuff to do. You know, the McDonald's is free. There's a movie theatre at the time. You know, video games were kind of new, and there was an arcade there. And yes, you can laugh, Ian, but that's true. I remember clearly there was a 10-pin bowling alley, and so there was a number of us that were walking around thinking, "Oh, this is pretty cool. Let's throw some balls down," which all of a sudden got super competitive. We must have done, I don't know, spent an hour and a half just throwing balls down. This is like day one of walking around the Olympic Village. And the coaches have said, just take it easy, take it easy. Anyway, for the next probably week as we're in the village, the physios were flat out on hip flexors, glutes, just with all the lunges people were doing, throwing balls around. All they were doing was repairing bowling injuries for the first week. So I think with that experience that we can kind of share with those guys coming into their first Olympic village was probably a bit of a hand.
Chris, I'll stay with you on this one. Obviously, you guys, you know, the 4x1, you'd had success with major meets in the lead up, which we touched on. Obviously, you won gold, the Pan Packs, I think second in Perth in 98. How competitive was it to be a part of that relay team? Obviously, I'm talking to you four guys today, but there's two legends that, you know, no doubt need to be a part of this conversation as well, which are Adam Pine and Todd Pearson, who just missed out on being a part of the team. You know, how competitive was it to be a part of this team?
No, it was super competitive. You know, we knew coming off the back of the Pan Packs that, you know, we were a real chance at Olympic medal in this event, which was the first time a 4x1 for Australia had really been a chance. So everyone wanted to be part of it. And Michael touched on it before. There was a real campaign of improving relays that Don Talbot brought to us he joined in 89, and that just built throughout the decade. And every relay for Australia at those Olympics was competitive, men and women. So the depth in that 100 freestyle, to give you context, in 1990, you know, Andrew Balden was the first Australian to break 50 seconds. And, you know, at our national championships, no one would have broken 50 seconds. And in fact, even at the Olympic trials in 92, I'm not sure that anyone actually broke 50 seconds. And then by the time we got to Sydney in 2000, to make the 100 final, you had to break 50 seconds. And Mike and I actually went through 49 at those trials as well. So, you know, there was a significant change and a lot of depth in that 100 freestyle. And I think part of the reason we did so well in Sydney was because everyone knew that there was a whole heap of guys knocking on the door wanting to get in, and it was just a tenths of a second basically to qualify your position. And that competitiveness ran all the way through to the heats on that first morning. So whilst a couple of us had some positions that were kind of secure, you know, the team itself wasn't calculated until after the heat. So right up until the death, people were still fighting for that position. I think that was key to such a strong team on the night.
Now, mate, whilst all the other boys in the team had the relay swims in the morning on the first day of competition, Ian, you had widely regarded as one of the biggest moments in the game's history. You went 3 minutes 40.59, broke the world record. You won the 400. So you had the heat swim and the final swim. Two-part question here. Firstly, talk to me about that moment, because as I said, it's a special memory for me watching. Obviously, you were there, you did it. Talk to me about that moment for you and what it was like.
Yeah, look, I'll just reflect on what Fyd said as well. Everyone competing for the positions in the relay. I didn't swim the heats of the 4x100 relay to see who's the fastest. The assessment was made, in the times that I was doing kind of leading up to it. So there was a lot of trust that was put in me. I didn't know until a couple of days before the relay that I would be swimming it. And it was because of the 400 freestyle that I had to swim, which was the second event on the program. And, I guess I swam the race that I wanted to. But going into it, I had my doubts. I hadn't had as comfortable a heat swim as what I thought I would. And, I was nervous on that stage. And it wasn't until they announced my name, Ian Thorpe from Australia, world record holder and world champion in lane 4, that the crowd cheered. And it was such a loud cheer that I did that stupid thing that kids do when you get in trouble when you don't know what to do, which is like laugh or smile. And I kind of smirked. And it was a moment I got out of my head and actually went, I'm actually ready for this. And I decided, that I would lead the race from start to finish. A coach had previously told me, if you can conserve some energy for the next event, you should probably do that, which is the worst thing you can say to an athlete, because in your mind, you start going to what's wrong with me? What don't I have? I've done this before. So that was kind of my lead in to the relay.
Well, secondly, mate, as I mentioned, the boys were primed and ready to go for the final. You'd only just swam your final. So how were you feeling, after you just finished the 400, you had to quickly get ready. I know there's a story behind you not quite being behind the blocks. I think you just got there just as they were about to go. How were you feeling mentally and physically, I guess, before that race?
Yeah, look, I had to kind of temper my emotions down a little bit after the 400. Knowing that, when I received my gold medal, that it would be, and it's my first Olympic gold medal, that to, really celebrate that occasion was not the right thing to do. I had to make sure I was thinking of what's coming up next. And next for me was a relay. So it was considering how many minutes there were between each point, what I'd be able to do, how I'd swim down, how I'd be able to warm up, how long it took to walk around the pool, how many minutes there were, and how much space there was to get ready. And then, it also turns out that, I didn't factor in breaking a swimsuit, which changed all of that.
Now, Michael, it's no secret that adding to the hysteria in the moment of you boys winning, which was, I promise I'll get to in a minute because I keep saying we'll get to it, and then I don't talk about it. But I promise we will. But playing a part in that, mate, were the words quoted by one US swimming legend, Gary Hall Jr., in where he said the USA team would smash you guys like guitars. Now, I know there's more to that quote, and I know he did go on to say that the race wouldn't be easy, and I know you guys have great respect for him, and he came over and, shook your hand, congratulated you after it. But, obviously the media grabbed that headline, go figure, and they ran with it. So the stage was set. How much did those words help motivate? I don't know, you don't need a lot of motivation to swim for your country, but did those words sort of resonate? Obviously, we played the air guitar at the end, so they were still there a little bit.
Look, I think personally they probably, or even, you can see our celebration. They certainly played a part in our celebrations at the end of the race. But I think as far as everyone mentioned so far, we wanted to be on that team so bad. We wanted to, do the best race we possibly could, to represent our country, to, give the Aussie swim team a good start at the meet. And there was enough motivation that we, a headline wouldn't provide us, really, to be honest. And I think Gary likes to build drama and anticipation and have the eyes watching him when he's swimming. And it probably, it's the only time that even when he was racing Alex and going head to head, he used to thrive on that. And probably, not sure if it was a strategic thing by him, but for us it certainly wasn't we didn't hold the paper up, every day and look at it and say we're gonna revenge this. We had enough sort of things that it was driving us to get there on the day and to do the best we could. So, but I'm glad we did. Thanks to Fides, glad we did the celebration the way we did, and we're still talking about it, and we've been labelled with the air guitar. So, it has its purpose.
Now, Ash, talk to me about your nerves before the final of that race. I mean, this is a major meet for you. You're in the final with the boys. Thorpe just won the 400. The crowd, the roof was half blown off. I'm going to say half, Thorpe, because obviously when in the final, then it completely came off in the relay. But, firstly, what about marshalling area? What's a marshalling area like? Obviously the words from Gary Hall Jr., you're in there, you're coming out to swim for your country. There's a lot of, big boys in there ready to testosterone's flowing. What is the marshalling area like before it? And then, for yourself, what were your nerves like going into that race?
Ash, how did you find it? That was the first Olympics 4x1 freestyle final room.
Yeah, look, thinking back, obviously I was quite nervous, but I've got to give a lot of thanks to my team coach, Gennady Turetsky, who I've mentioned in previous podcasts or interviews and things like that he likes to talk for me in riddles or philosophies, and he calmed me right down. And so before getting in the pool, once I was selected to swim into the final and before jumping in for my warm-up preparing for that race that evening, he pulled me aside and spent a good half an hour with me just talking about anything else other than swimming. And I think that calming influence helped me quite a bit, unknowingly what he was really doing, because obviously the theatre of your home Olympics and knowing that there was 18,000 strong out there and you're doing it in front of your home crowd, the last thing you really wanted to do was mess it up. So I went through my normal routine, came out feeling quite good. Obviously, the team and the support team were great, and there was a little bit of a buzz after Ian's victory in his 400 as well. So just calmly sitting down, can't remember who I was sitting with at this point in time, but putting on my suit and just thinking about everything that I'd worked towards and what I had to do come my third leg in my relay. But sitting in the marshalling room was something quite different for me, because I'd only experienced it at the Com Games, and that's nothing compared to this. So, for me, the Yanks are quite boisterous and quite flamboyant, and like everyone know that they're there. And then what we had, I think the Italians on the other side, and they're quite, for me, they were quite quiet and sticking to themselves. And I just remember looking down and seeing Michael and Fides just doing their own thing, just calmly, and that was massive for me as well, being very inexperienced, and the nerves were building too. I mean, you could hear the crowd out there. Every time something happened, the crowd would go crazy. But I think the thing that stuck in my mind is the three of us had walked out, and there was no Ian. Obviously, he'd mentioned some hiccups that he was dealing with before walking out, and just as we were walking out and you grab each other's arm and you're about to raise your arm to acknowledge the crowd after they've announced you, Thorpe appears out of nowhere and grabs my arm, and up we go. So for me, the build up to the race was quite calm, because I'm very lucky that I had a great support network around me. But the nerves for me didn't really start to go nuts until the pressure was on you, knowing that Michael had done a fantastic job in his relay leg, and then obviously Fides capitalised on that, and then it was my turn, and then that's when it really hit hard, when Fides was coming back on his second 50.
All right, well, Ash has brought me into it, so let's get started. I'll go in relay order. Firstly, Michael, world record, 48.18. Was that on the cards leading into the final? Was it spoken about, or is this purely the results of a man who just wanted to give everything he had for his country, and he just, went out?
Oh, look, I definitely didn't think I was going to swim that quick. I had a pretty good trials and swimming 48.5, and went head to head with Fides. That was probably one of my best races with Chris, and I knew that I was obviously around the mark, but I was flying in the morning. I came in and suited up and did a 50, and I felt really fresh, and I was almost like just waiting, just bursting out of my skin. So for me, it was always a matter of containing my energy and emotional and nervous energy. So, and and yeah, I was very fortunate, very similar to Ash, that I had Fides in there and then team managers, and knowing that it was almost like it was an air of calmness, even though we knew Thorpe was going through his own dramas with the suit. But it was almost like we were just lining up, like no matter what, he was going to get there. And yeah, I felt that physically, I was probably in the best shape I ever was. I've never swum faster since that day. So, and it was just one of those things that all the things that I worked on from my start to my breakout, my underwater, accelerating into the wall, and those just technical things that when you were putting together a 48-second swim, you want every single thing to come off the best you can. And I don't think I can fault too many things in that swim. So, I've just felt really good about it all. And I felt like I was really built up to that event, and we swam well in the 4x2 a couple of days later, but I kind of felt like I spent all my bickies in that one 48-second swim. So, but I'm glad I did. So, yeah, but there was certainly a build up over the last few years in the lead up to that event. And, I felt that I left it all in the pool.
Question to the room, obviously, watching Klimmy go and break a world record, how confidence, obviously you didn't need any more confidence, but obviously you see him go a world record and have a great lead leg. Did that build confidence in you guys to follow that after?
You're fired, you're a second.
I actually had no idea, obviously, what Michael had done. I knew he was swimming well, so it's probably for the other two boys to answer that one.
Yeah, for me, it as I said before, it made me more incredibly nervous because I didn't think that we'd actually be in this position and as far out as front as we were. And by the time Fides had turned on his return 50, and Neil Walker had pulled up to him, but Fides was well renowned for his last 35, and he really put the pedal down and really pulled away. So I was semi-confident in my own ability because I had the big great Jason Lezak swimming beside me, and we know what he did a few years after as well. But I guess the piece of advice that was explained to me was just relax on the first 30 of your first lap. And I probably relaxed a little too much on that Lezak pull me in, and then coming or approaching the wall, I had to increase my intensity, then hit the wall and really poured it on coming home. So I knew that I had the ability to be able to compete coming home, so long as that I didn't spend all my gas down the first 50. If you watch myself, Fides and Thorpe race, that's kind of how we went about it. But Thorpe always said he wanted a greater lead, and he probably could have done with that, but he was good enough to win off a 0.2 changeover or a 0.2 lead there and nailed his changeover. And for when I walked behind the blocks and watching him come home and he was just chewing into Gary Hall's lead, then I knew it was a very real possibility that, heck, we're in this.
Mm. Yep. Well, Chris, how much do you think that played a part in, obviously, we can watch it from just a crowd perspective and watch the way you guys race, watch, the way Thorpe clawed the lead back. But obviously, race plan wise, was there a clear sort of focus on the back end and making sure you always had a good back end yourself, but making sure you really finished strong and that the Americans maybe weren't as back end dominated? So that was race plan wise a way you could, get that victory?
Yeah, that was absolutely race plan. So simply, Michael's job was to get us out in front, and the rest of us was to make sure that we stayed in front from that perspective. Looking at the Americans and the way they swam, they were always much sharper in the way in which they swam that 100 over that first 50. And so our job really was to try and encourage them to overswim that first lap just a little bit, and then play to our strengths in the back end. And Michael did a great job of getting out in front. Then my job with Neil was to encourage him in, and I managed to get that away. Yeah, Ash, to his credit, in a big meet, first really big meet like that, swimming in that event, did an amazing job of keeping his head for a young guy, and not swimming his natural kind of 100 freestyle, but actually following the plan. And again, the reason for the success of this team was not necessarily individual performances, although a world record certainly helps to kick off the first leg. But the fact that all four of us actually delivered against the plan that we'd agreed and executed it, like Michael said, we all look back on that race, and there was just very few mistakes that were made, and that's key. So certainly that strategy of back ending the race was important. The other thing we spent a lot of time on was changeovers and making sure that those changeovers were fast. And as you know, a changeover is not, watching the person touch the wall and then jumping off. It's preparing, it's watching that person swimming in, knowing when that hand's going to touch, leaving or commencing leaving well before, at least half a second before the person's hand actually touches. You're starting to get the momentum moving off the blocks. So if ever you see someone touch a wall, you're having a terrible kind of changeover. And so we practice that a lot. And then Ian's job really was to get down and back. We knew Ian would have a great last 50. We needed to get him, a big enough lead against Gary to give him that opportunity. And whilst we thought 2.2 of a second was heaps, he probably should have. I think 0.1 would have been enough, to be honest. He makes a big scene about the fact that we didn't give him enough lead to get home.
Well, given that you're a lawyer, when you actually finished your race, you said to Lumpy, you said to Michael, "Do you think we've got enough lead?" Your question, so don't put that on me. I learned a very valuable lesson.
Well played, Thorpe. Well played, Thorpe.
What you want in life.
Very good.
The only thing I've learned off you is you sit in the sun.
What was your changeover, Thorpe? You were like 0.1, weren't you? Or 0.12 or something on the changeover? You were pretty...
I was very
you
fast.
rushed it.
I was very fast because you guys hadn't given me enough. But yeah, one of the many things that Chris Fydler has actually taught me as he sits in the sun, he also taught me if you can make a shadow, you can get a tan.
Yeah, there was a whole cultural thing that you needed to absorb about being a sprinter, mate. It was too much time in the water is not good for anyone.
Vitamin D can get you something quick too.
There it is. So Michael's on top of it as well. Yeah.
Now, boys, obviously the race plan-wise, you guys executed perfectly the back end, but obviously helping that back end was the fact that the crowd, and as you said, 18,000 or whatever, was just, going off every time you guys were charging down the back end. How much did that play a part? Did you hear it at all? I know obviously we want to know that you heard it, and we, even as coaches, sometimes we're going, oh, go, and we hope that really we're doing nothing other than making ourselves feel better. But did you guys hear it at all or no?
Well, for me, obviously, watching the guys swim after I finished,
you heard it all.
It was incrementally getting louder and louder. The more the crowd noticed that we're in this race, and I think people started towards the last two legs. I think people were on their feet already. So, and then when Thorpe was in his last sort of 20 meters, people were stomping on the actual stand, and the whole thing was vibrating. And I think I'm not sure if Fides or Thorpe mentioned that the actual bolts had removed from the ground a little bit because they hadn't calculated for people actually jumping up and down, only standing in the stand. So there was definitely, I don't think they ever predicted there'd be such a big crowd with such an amount of noise. So it was deafening, and in the last sort of 20 meters, I could definitely notice it's something I've never experienced in that pool ever again. So. It was certainly very loud, that's for sure. I hope you guys can back me up on that.
Yeah, Thorpe, your experience is an interesting one because you had the 400 as well. Talk about your stuff. I like your explanation of that race.
Do you?
Yeah,
so look, the 400 for me, I'd never heard as large a cheer as what it was for me during that 400 or before the 400. And so then after it, the crowds obviously, they are energized coming into this race and lead up to what it is. When Michael broke the world record in the first lap, the crowd cheered to that, as Fides was actually diving into the pool because it came up on the thing, and the crowd erupted again. And
so it wasn't just because I dove in.
Everyone was like, It's mostly about it's about Mike at this time. Not about you, mate. So it was then, you know, I could say the crowd just, you know, the level just dropped.
As the race settled.
There was a consistency across everyone, and especially when we turn. And when we turn in front, every time it would amplify. It would go up, and then when we had a changeover where we were in front, that roar would really lift. And so, I mean, when it came to my leg and we were in front, I haven't heard anything like it at any competition anywhere in the world where I've swum at or I've seen someone else swim at that was like that. And you know, from that point, you know, it may have helped that there was a closed roof and everything else. And I don't want to detract from what other swimmers have achieved, but for some reason, this was as loud as it gets in a swimming race.
Well, Ian, while we're still with you, let's go to that finish. And obviously, I can still hear the commentary now. Maybe it's just because it's all over the opener to my podcast. But, you know, it's Thorpe and Hall, and, you know, Thorpe goes in, Australia win, the roof blows off the joint. Everyone was screaming in their lounge rooms at home. At what point for you, though, in that 100, did you start to really feel comfortable that, okay, I'm getting him here. This is, you know, it's time to put the foot down?
Well, there was nothing to put down to start with. I didn't have, I guess, the tools that other people may have in the 100 to be able to utilize. There was no speed that I could have gone out faster in, but I had confidence in what I could do in the second 50 and not fatiguing. That's about all I had. And the first time I knew, because I knew Gary would be ahead of me at the 50. I knew that. I just was in disbelief during the first 50 how quickly he had caught up to me, because I had a good changeover. His was slower than mine, so I gained a little bit. But you know, it was gone. It evaporated. But I turned at 50, I pushed off the wall, and I had a really good turn, which I don't usually have in 100. I think because the American team and the Australian team was so far ahead, I missed a lot of the wash that I would have otherwise. And I popped up and I went, okay, you know, now we're at it. This is the second 50. And, you know, I think at about 25 meters, I realized I'm starting to get back into the race, because that enthusiasm, that cheer from the crowd, that kind of dissipated as soon as Gary Hall, you know, went off in front of me. And it was, you know, I felt a silence, which was kind of like a collective sigh when, you know, that had happened. And then I could also hear the crowd building as I was going through that second 50. It was probably about around 15 meters to go, where I realized how much I was gaining. And with about 10 to 8 meters to go, I realized it would come down to a touch. And I reminded myself to lengthen my stroke. And a very quick, he's a sprinter, it will hurt him more than you, was what I told myself. And that was it. That was when I put my head down.
Quick one to all the boys just on that. And there's one thing that I, as a coach, marvel at watching you guys in that. And I have rewatched it many, many times, as a lot of people have. But the fact that it was such a major moment, a major event, but you guys were all still so professional enough to, as Thorpe just said, think about, you know, your race plan, think about stretching out, think about these sort of things that even to this day, I'm talking to people on the podcast a lot, and you know, they're making still those little errors at a world championship level at times, depending on the pressure. I think one thing that does get lost at times with your race and what you guys were able to achieve is the professionalism you guys sort of held throughout that. What do you think?
Well, I agree with you. I think it's, you know, I think the result obviously speaks for itself. This time I think all of us collectively swam the best races we ever had put together. So And we, as Fides mentioned, we had a very, strict plan that we wanted to fulfill, I guess, from the word get-go. And it's for us, it's not, you don't know, and all younger swimmers that are listening, it's, you can have as much willpower and as much aggression as you want, but if you don't have the skill and the practice and those little minor details, like Fides mentioned, the changeovers and, just the little things from, like Thorpe mentioned, getting under the wave and the 50 meters off the turn, those little things that ultimately add up to, 3 minutes of a relay. So for us, we all had those small increments to add up to the total result. So, as much as so much, and that's the beauty about, an elite sport, that there are so many distractions. There's obviously the crowd, there's other teams, there's, your teammates probably screaming in your ear, but it's ultimately just when you get up on the blocks, you just got this, 40 odd seconds of swimming to do. And it's normally the simpler you keep it, the clearer the messaging you have in your head, normally the better the result. And I think all the boys will vouch for that. I normally didn't have in a monologue like Thorpe did throughout the races. I was normally screaming as trying to put the pain away, but just having simple cues to get you to the wall. So, and you can never forget that. So that's definitely the key of having control of yourself in the high pressure situations.
I look at the 4x1 and I did execute what I could do properly. Whereas the 400 freestyle that I'd done, I see every mistake that I made during the race. I was breathing into turns. I was, I wasn't doing it as well as I could. But I think for all of us, when reflecting on this, there probably isn't anything that we could change, even although Ash said prior to this, that, maybe he took, his foot off the pedal a little bit too much in the first lap. I disagree with him on that. I actually think it was the right thing for him because I knew how he'd then be able to come back in the next 50.
Thanks, Ian. I think when it comes to the 4x1 and what we're talking about, it's the little things that can win and lose. And it's the little things that made the difference on the day. And it comes back to a culture, and the staff and especially the head coach at the time played a massive importance on relays. And one thing you did not want to do is let down your teammates. And so in saying that, you had to execute the little things to make the big difference. And with the culture and the little things that we did right and the skill level that we had to be able to execute under pressure, made the difference at the end of the day as well.
Now, I've said it a few times on Instagram now. Sorry, Ian, did you want to?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think this relay, it wasn't just the 4 of us or the 6 of us that competed in it. It was a relay that the entire Australian swim team believed that we could actually win. And we knew that going into this. There were some people that don't know swimming that thought the same thing, but the fact that our team thought that this was winnable, it added an extra dimension to it, an extra amount of pressure, but also an extra kind of backing. The weight wasn't on our shoulders, it was pushing us ahead to the result.
It's quite funny. We've got this 2000 team WhatsApp group, and we chatted this morning, and the amount of people that said that they blew their taper just off cheering for our relay. We felt quite guilty about ruining people's preparation, but they said it was bloody worth it. So even I've never seen Dawn jump up and down as much as she did on that night too. So it was. I think it meant a lot to everybody, including ourselves, obviously.
I've said it a few times now on Instagram comments and also on the podcast, but this was a race that not only inspired the country at the time, but generations to come. I know I speak to a lot of athletes here on the podcast, even, 16, 17-year-olds. And one question I always ask is, what would you like? What do you go back and rewatch? What's your favorite race to rewatch? And they say the 4x1, and these are kids who weren't even born at the time. So clearly it made an impact on their parents. That it's just a race that, just evokes such emotion. Chris, how proud are you of that, of what you guys have achieved? But, the profound impact you guys are having on swimming in this country that just continues. It's not just, in 2000, it wasn't even 10 years. It just continues to grow.
It does. It's an interesting one, and why that race sticks out. There's probably 100 reasons that all came together on that night that people really love. Whether it be the first night of the Olympics or a great come from behind story, although it wasn't come from behind until Ian got in, and then we just an unexpected victory, the first time Americans have been beaten. But ultimately, I think it comes down to those Sydney Games just being so special to Australians and to swimmers. I'm all in awe of the achievements of Michael and Ian particularly. No disrespect, Ash, but for those guys with the backgrounds that they have and what they achieved in our sport, to still think that this relay is, if not their greatest memory, certainly up in their top couple of memories. To be able to say that I swam with those two guys for that is really humbling. And as far as the young kids are concerned, listen, it's a great race to watch. And no matter who you are, if you're Australian and watching that race, you can't help but be inspired. We love beating strong American teams, and that was certainly one of those. And I think that's probably why it lives on. That and the fact that we continually email every single person who ever swims and send them links to it to make sure that they watch it every day. Probably helps as well.
We need a remastered version. I think the VHS is getting a bit of workout. But just a second Fides on that. I just wanted to say, I think what young kids can take, or even youngsters in swimming can take away from this relay, is that, we all kind of grew up in different centers and different cities. We came together, at trials, we raced head to head, and, we were fierce competitors. And then what we obviously, in our time between trials and the Olympics, we bonded, we created a unit that was, and we didn't know what that unit was until that morning of the heats anyway. But, having self-belief, being the underdogs, and, with the Americans have amazing history in that event in swimming. But, I think the youngsters can take away, I think the most important thing is that these opportunities don't come very often. And, you can create a strong relay team with like-minded people and people that have, they actually make you better. And that's, I think, what happened on this night, that we actually, together, we became much better swimmers than what we were individually. So I think that's why everyone enjoys swimming relays and swim better than what they have in individual swims.
I believe it's more reflective of the time that we're at as well, with the Olympics and Australia in, preparing for the games and the doubts that we'd be able to deliver an event that we could be proud of on a world stage. And I think that has contributed to the legend of what this race is. For Australians, I think there's nothing better than an underdog story that comes true. And that certainly happened during this relay swim. But I can remember I flew virtually straight after the games. I actually was in the States, and I got, you're the torpedo. Congratulations on beating the American team. Even Americans were amazed at what we had accomplished in Sydney.
Yeah, look, I think the Australians love an underdog, as Ian said, and I think now that you show this footage to a younger generation coming through, and it basically shows that anything is possible, even if you think it is impossible. So, it's something to be proud of.
Well, I put it on the iPad for the swimmers this morning, just so you know, and they were all cheering at the end of it. I had about 20 kids at the end watching around the blocks, just a small iPad, but they were all cheering. So it still gets the same reaction, not quite as loud as obviously 2000, but there were still definitely cheers going on. Now, boys, I want to finish up with a bit of fun today. We're going to play a game that I like to call the Sydney 2000 Quick Quiz. Feel free to play along at home if you are listening. Now, these questions are all based around the Sydney 2000 Olympics or pop culture around that time. I'll do it really quickly because I know we're running out of time. There's only about 5 questions, so don't worry. Your names are your buzzers or your nicknames. You can use your nicknames. Go for gold. And we'll start with question 1. Now, everyone knows Kathy Freeman famously lit the cauldron at the opening ceremony, but which 2 Aussies were also a part of the final stages of the torch relay. Which two Aussie swimmers were a
Lumpy.
part of?
Shane Gould and
Dawn
Fraser.
One each. I'll give you half. Question 2. Everyone knows who came first and second in the men's 100 freestyle. But which country got bronze?
Ash, Brazil.
Brazil. Very good.
Yeah, good one.
I actually didn't know that myself until I had a quick check of it.
I didn't know that either.
Now, Eric the Eel became an instant star in 2000 when he swam.
Eric the Eel.
No, that's not the question. The question was, who can get closest to the time he swam?
Lumpy. I reckon he did a minute 21.
Okay.
2 minutes.
No.
Ash, 3 minutes.
Thorpe?
I said 156.
Thorpe wins. It was 152.72.
Oh, wow.
God
He
bless him.
went-
He
he
was
went
blowing a
121 in
gale
Mexico
after that
Olympics.
race too. God bless him.
Actually, it's a true story. I had to rescue him at Bondi Beach when there was a photo shoot for Speedo a few days later. He went out. He'd never been in the surf before, so we got him in.
He's now the head coach of Equatorial Guinea for anyone who wants to know. I've been trying to track him down for the podcast, but I can't get his number.
He can swim under a minute now as well.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know. Yeah, he did. He went on to break the minute and do pretty well.
Right.
All right.
Someone said he went 52 seconds. Is that true or not really?
I think it's
That's
56.
it.
I don't know if he got that fast. Question 4. Who sang the song Strawberry Kisses?
Ash, Nicky Webster.
Yes.
I intentionally didn't answer that just to see who knew.
Actually,
I'm going to ask it.
he had that in his earpods on the way in the marching area.
There he was back then.
All right. Question number 5. Russell Crowe had a movie that was released in 2000. Yep. Gladiator. Very good. All right. I think we've got a tie at the moment. So this will come down to the final question. Oh, you're keeping score.
I'm on 3.
Okay, give him another lead. It's
Okay, all right. All right. Who can name the mascots from the Sydney Olympics? And I'll give you a bonus point if you can get the Paralympic one.
Oh God, no, I don't know. Wombat? No, Fatso? That's the wombat. No, that was in.
No, it was Lizzie. It was a lizard,
Lizzie.
frill-necked lizard.
Yeah.
Oh God.
All right, boys. Now, I want to thank you all very much for coming on and agreeing for this chat. It's a special moment for me. I cannot tell you how much it means to me to have you guys on the show, and obviously the listeners out there and having you guys together. Thank you for being, champions of our sport, inspiring not just the country, but as I said, all the swimmers to come. Your contributions to our great sport, will just continue to be replayed for many years to come. Hopefully, they can start to fix up the visual because the video is starting to look old. I tell you
Let's
what.
start the movement. Get a remastered
They
version.
can, digitally remaster, fix it up a little bit. But, mate, you're bloody legends. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for coming on Off the Block Swimming Podcast.
Thanks
Good on you.
Awesome. Thank you.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Today's episode of Off the Block Swimming Podcast is proudly brought to you by Arena Australia and Arena NZ. Today's episode of Off the Block Swimming Podcast is proudly brought to you by Pro Swim Workouts.